Have some sauce. Alrighty. So, welcome to our April TA call. Today, we're going to be talking about adopting a strength-based approach for youth peer advocates. So, just as a little introduction to me, my name is Mimi. I am the youth training coordinator here at Families Together, and I'm currently dual credentialed as a youth peer advocate with lived experience navigating the mental health system. And I am also a family peer advocate with experience navigating systems as a caregiver. Now, we would love to have all of you introduce yourselves. We'll, of course, get started with my counterpart, Jay. But if you could please make sure that you include your name, your pronouns, your agency, your role, the county that you work in, and one positive attribute about yourself.
My name is Jay Culkin. I use he, him. I am the Youth Workforce Development Coordinator here at Families Together. This is a statewide role, but I currently reside in Washington County. And a positive attribute about myself is that I am hilarious. We all know this about me, right? Oh. Yeah.
Could go next. Oh, okay. Hi everyone. I'm not able to show my camera. I'm outside. But I'm Jerixa. I work with SEO Family of Services. I'm a youth peer advocate, and one positive attribute about myself is I'm very understanding, I guess. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Alex. I go by she, her. I am a youth peer advocate at New Directions, and I work in Niagara County. And I guess I'm very empathetic and have a big heart.
And I see that Emma took the opportunity to introduce herself in the chat. So Emma works for Independent Living of the Genesee region, is a YPA for Genesee, Orleans, and Wyoming County, and is creative and kind. I love that. Alrighty, well, we are all pretty familiar with each other in this room, so I'm going to just keep going. Alrighty, so today our learning objectives will be to define a strength-based approach, to describe the core principles of a strength-based approach, analyze common barriers to practicing a strength-based approach, and identify practical solutions to address them, and then to develop a plan to apply strength-based practices within your teams and in partnership with families that you're working with. All right, so first up, quick reflection. What is a strength-based approach? There are no wrong answers. What do you guys think that is? Feel free to come off of mute or pop it in the chat.
Using your best qualities or your strengths to help somebody else.
Yeah, using your best qualities and strengths to help someone else. Anyone want to add to that? I think the consensus is that Alex hit that on the head.
I was gonna say, like creating goals based on a person's strength and building on it.
Yes, creating goals based on someone's strengths and building on it. Love that. Thank you. Okay, so a strength-based approach, whoops, focuses on the positive attributes of a person or a group rather than their challenges. And so often when we're talking about our youth, we may have other people on our treatment team that tend to focus on the deficits or the challenges that the youth is facing. But here, when we're using a strength-based approach in peer services, we want to focus on the positive attributes of a person or that family rather than their challenges and the difficulties that they're having. All right, so we're going to talk really quickly about the traditional care model. So, when we talk about a strength-based approach, it kind of helps for us to take a look at what a traditional care model looks like in contrast. So, the traditional care model, um, in this model, the service provider is the expert and the patient is expected to follow their advice. The service recipient is typically not part of creating the treatment plan, and the purpose of the visit is created to identify the deficits or the problems, and care is often standardized. So we see that in this model, it is deficit focused, problem driven, and the professional stands as the expert. So have you guys been in any situations where you've seen the traditional care model show up?
Like a doctor's office.
Oh. Typically, so like in a doctor's office, a doctor typically is not going to tell you about whatever ailments they have, but they are going to say that I'm the expert. This is what ailment you have. This is what I'm going to prescribe, and this is the plan that I expect you to follow. Absolutely. All right. So now taking a look at that traditional model, we're going to look at how we can move to a strength-based approach. So that traditional model is in the black here, and that's going to talk about focusing on finding and solving problems, and the experts hold the power. As we talk about strength-based, we are going to contrast the changes, which would be language, where the power lies. And so with our language, we focus on identifying existing strengths and building on them to solve problems. The power is shared with our youth and our families, and the role of youth and families, we value them and we partner with them to make these changes. So the differences are pretty clear here when we're talking about our strength-based approach. Also, the youth and the family are the experts, and we are simply just assisting them. So this is where empowerment really shows up, not just as a buzzword, but in how decisions get made, whose voice carries the weight, and how success is defined. So we always want to move even from a strength-based approach towards empowerment, where families can feel capable and they drive the care that's provided. And ultimately, we know that our role with them is temporary. So we want to empower our families to be able to advocate for themselves and make those changes on their own. Alrighty. So, quick group discussion. Where do you already see strength-based practices happening in your work, even if they may appear as unofficial or informal? And actually, before we get into that group discussion, I realized that someone snuck right in here. Cassidy, if you'd like to, please feel free to come off of mute or pop it in the chat and introduce yourself. Please include your name, your pronouns, your role, your agency, and the county that you're working in, and a positive attribute about yourself. And Cassie is a youth peer advocate at Families on the Move, and the pronouns are her and she. Awesome. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. All right, so going back into our group discussion, I see we have someone else coming in, but we'll get started with this group discussion and then we'll get back to introductions. Where do we see the strength-based approach appear in our work as YPAs?
I see it in my work every day. I kind of use it all the time. Um, Sometimes some of the things I do for like strength based is like if some of my youth have like similar strengths, I will try to work with them together so they can build on it. Hold on, sorry. If you hear the noise, I'm so sorry. And
You're okay.
and then I will start like skill building. So that can look like if one person has their strength is personal, like they know themselves very well, I'll try to partner them up with someone that does it so that they can build on each other's strengths and help each other out. So like for instance, I took them to like the auto show and one of my youth struggled a lot with social connection, but another one didn't. So I'm telling you the whole day they was both interacting with each other and just coming out of that shell. And I'm like, you see, you said you couldn't do something, but look at you, you did it. So just I've been using it that way as a YPA lately. Yeah.
Awesome. I really enjoy that you're taking your youth, finding what strengths they have, and then also grouping them together so that they have some sort of social interaction, but that way they can help each other work on those strengths. So I like that you said you kind of paired up one person who struggles with that social interaction with someone who doesn't struggle nearly as much. So they were able to build those skills together. As well as that other youth who already had that as a strength now is trying to, is learning that skill of helping someone else come out of their shell as well. That's really awesome. It's a great example of skill building. Does anyone else have any other examples? The use of MI and working with the individuals as a resource and partner. Awesome. And also, William, if you want to come off of mute and feel free to introduce yourself, please make sure that you include your name, pronouns, role, agency, county, and a positive attribute. And I will send that to you. Here you go. I see that you're unmuted, but I'm not able to hear you. No problem. We definitely understand technical difficulties. So if you'd like to, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, as well as you can always participate in the chat as well. I see you said you're going to switch your device. Absolutely no problem. Anyone else want to point out where they see strength-based practices happening in your work as a YPA? All right, that was some good examples. So the strength-based approach that we're talking about, when we interact with others, we often want to highlight their strengths. And one way to identify strengths of others is to ask curious questions. So here are some ideas of questions we can ask is how did the youth get to where they are? What natural supports does the youth have? What does the youth feel they do well? And what does the youth hope for? By identifying these key pieces, we can understand where a youth has come from, kind of what their ideology may be in terms of what they want to do, which means that we can make sure that our goals and objectives that we set are going to be youth guided, as well as finding out what a youth feels that they do well allows them to already identify their strengths for us. Finding out what they hope for allows us to figure out how we can use those strengths to build a plan that meets their goals and objectives. All right, so core principles of a strength-based approach. Number one, every person has strengths. So everyone brings abilities, knowledge, experiences, and personal resources, regardless of the challenges that they face. Strengths may not always be obvious, but they are always present. Number two, partnership, not clienthood. So the people that we work with are partners. They're not just passive recipients of services. This shift means that we replace being expert driven with collaboration and moving away from doing for our youth towards working with our youth. This change is more effective when it is co-created. Number three, empowerment leads to change. People are more likely to grow and succeed when they have a voice, choice, and ownership in the decisions that affect them. Empowerment isn't just about permission, it's about sharing the power. Number four, hope and possibility matter. Belief in potential influences outcomes. In practice, this looks like setting realistic but meaningful goals, highlighting progress, not just outcomes, and speaking in future focused language. Hope is not naive, it's actually motivational. And as a YPA, our lived experience statement prompt even asks all of you to provide examples of how you would use your lived experience in your work as a youth peer advocate. When doing so, identify the tools and skills you would or have utilized that focus on empowerment, engagement, and hope. This is because peer support is built on the pillars of empowerment, engagement, and hope. Number five, cultural identity is a resource, not an obstacle. Culture, language, values, and lived experience are strengths to build on, not barriers to work around. Our effective practice of being culturally humble honors identity rather than asking people to leave pieces of themselves out of the process. And finally, we focus on strengths, not deficits. While needs and challenges exist, they do not define a person. Being strength-based means naming what's working, using strengths to address challenges, avoiding labels that limit possibility. To make it clear, we're not ignoring the problems, we just approach them through strengths. So, what are some strengths that you've seen in youth or families that weren't obvious at first? Oh, and I see we have Emma in the chat too. I've been doing a lot with employment lately, so focusing on an individual's strengths and interests when looking for work. Or we do the dimensions of wellness, so highlighting areas that are going well, not just areas of need. Absolutely. That's awesome. So I think sometimes the strengths that we might not always see as obvious can be natural supports. So sometimes if you're thinking about a youth that you're working with, if they have a very strong connection to their faith or their faith background, perhaps they go to church, perhaps they have a trusted pastor or advisor that speaks to them and speaks to their spirituality, that's often not taken as a strength, but it is a strength. Sometimes it's all about rewording as well. So we might have a youth who's very good at advocating for themselves, even to a point where it may upset some adults, and maybe they don't always do it in the most polite way. However, it's really important that we note that that's a strength. They're able to say what they want. They're able to communicate their needs. They're able to advocate on their own behalf. We just need to figure out how to refine the language that they're using. And also, welcome to William. So your name is Bill, and you work at the Tri Center, which is an SUD outpatient program in the Bronx, and you are a CRPA recovery coach and trainer. Awesome. Welcome, welcome. We are happy to have you here. All right. So when we're looking at what a strength-based practice believes, this may probably feel familiar. And the reason why is because there's a lot of overlap with the areas of being strength-based and youth peer support principles. And so if we take a look at these side by side, the strength-based approach views challenges as opportunities for growth and aims to build resilience and a sense of control for our youth. And two of the principles of youth peer support state that it is strength-based and focuses on outcomes and success. So as you look at these next to each other, you will probably notice there's a lot that they coincide with, and that is on purpose. And so taking the strength-based approach, just know that it is literally rooted in youth peer support work. And so we should always be using a strength-based approach. Alrighty, so just a quick reflection. Take a moment to check in with yourself and answer these two questions. You don't necessarily need to share your answers, but I just urge you to take a moment to evaluate and reflect on where you are. So which of these principles feels easiest to practice right now, and which principle feels the hardest, and why? So I'll just give you guys a second to reflect on those questions, and I'll actually go back so you can take a look at those principles one more time as you are reflecting on that. So think about which one is easiest to practice and which one is most difficult for you. Yes, and I wasn't. All righty. So now that we've kind of thought about which ones of these might be easier and which ones might be harder, let's talk about the barriers to being strength-based. Um, so many of these barriers don't come from a lack of caring or skill. They actually can come from systems, stress, and learned ways of working. So number one, burnout. Burnout can make it harder to notice strengths or stay hopeful, especially in high demand systems. This can look like defaulting to task completion over connection with your youth, having less patience, curiosity, or flexibility, or even feeling emotionally exhausted or disconnected from your youth. Supporting ourselves is part of supporting others. We always have to remember we can't pour from an empty cup. Number two, our personal experience. So, our own lived experiences can be powerful tools, but they can also unintentionally limit our perspective. How does this show up? Sometimes we might think, well, this worked for me, so it should work for them. Or taking disengagement or resistance personally, or maybe even over identifying or distancing ourselves from the youth. Our experience informs our work, but the young person or family is the expert on their own life. And so we want to make sure that we aren't allowing that to hinder our ability to help someone else. Number three, bias. Often unconscious, but it can shape how we interpret behavior, engagement, and potential. How does this show up in our work? Sometimes we might have lower expectations for certain youth or families. We might make assumptions based on race, culture, language, diagnosis, or even system involvement. Maybe that comes up as labeling behaviors rather than understanding the context of them. Self reflection and cultural humility help us better recognize strengths across difference. Number four, the influence of other providers' opinions. Strength-based practice can be challenged by deficit-focused language used by others in the system. So what does this look like? Perhaps you have case notes that are only focused on the problems. Labels focus, labels like this can actually follow youth across systems, and there might be pressure to conform to the dominant narrative. So if you are already taking a look at like an intake form for a youth, sometimes when you just read that language and it's deficit focused, it already feels like you have an idea of who this youth is, but it's kind of negative and it's written in that way. And that can actually really hurt our chances of connecting with them. I always say when I read my intake forms, I read it and then I forget them. I literally read them as like information to have in the back of my head and then I forget them. I want to meet my youth and I want them to tell me who they are. And I take who they are as a person and who they present to me far more concrete than what I see on paper, just because I don't know the lens in which this documentation has been written. So I think that it's definitely possible for us to hold a different narrative while still collaborating professionally. And number five, documentation. So documentation systems often prioritize risk, compliance, and problems over strengths. So this might look like strengths are reduced to just one checkbox or a sentence, language that often centers deficits because that's what the forms require, or feeling like strength-based work doesn't count if it's not measurable. So even within required documentation, we can intentionally integrate strength-based language. With that in mind, are there any other possible barriers to being strength-based that I haven't listed that anyone wants to bring?
Parents' opinions. Like during the first like intake process and they're like, "Oh, they do this or they do that," and like you haven't had a chance to fully connect with the child yet, like, and they just keep telling you all the negative stuff.
Absolutely. So sometimes when we speak with parents, our parents Yeah, so sometimes when we're talking with parents, the ways that the parent might explain who their child is or how their child shows up can definitely be deficit focused and give you an idea of this child in a different light. And so it can actually contaminate your ability to be strength based because the parent is already presenting their child as a problem, as challenges, as deficits, rather than speaking to the strengths that they have. Great example. So it might not just be providers. Maybe we should change that to other people's opinions. All right, so we're going to take a moment to go through each of those barriers. So, number one, burnout. Burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion that's brought on by prolonged or repeated stress. Sorry. Burnout can lead to a lack of empathy, cause detachment, impair your cognitive function, and focus on efficiency over individual needs, and eventually erode effective communication. So, a lot of times when people are burned out, we might just tell them to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and that's really hard for someone to do. It's often I feel like burnout can often feel like a heavy personal thing when you reach a point of burnout, but it's important to note that burnout is typically not caused by anything that you personally do, but more so by systemic issues. And so perhaps it's just the work environment that you're in. There's a very high pace, very fast paced environment. Again, as we work as YPs, we do work with youth that are going through their lived experience. So we can be re traumatized. There is such thing as secondary post traumatic stress syndrome that we sustain as we're working with these youth and talking to them about the many traumatic systems that they are going through as well. So, how do we prevent burnout? So, number one, we are always going to urge you to take care of yourself. As I noted before, you cannot pour from an empty cup. Work to manage your stress, create work-life balance. That normally means setting boundaries, cultivate social supports, find people outside of this work that you can talk to, that can support you in everything that you're doing, review your well-being to maintain resilience, and maintain your physical and mental health. Some of these things in practice can look like taking time off, setting boundaries, turning off your work phone at 5 o'clock, not answering youth if you're outside of your hours. Just things like that allow you to set boundaries and prevent burnout. Does anyone else have any tips or tricks as to how we can prevent burnout? That lack of empathy, patience are big ones. Rationalizing unprofessional behavior and attitude is another. Absolutely. So there are times where, you're so burnt out that that is kind of the way that you think, but overall, just it can just contribute to a lack of a strength-based approach. Thanks for that. And if you guys are looking for more information on that, how to prevent burnout, there is a previous TA call on self-care, which you're more than welcome to go and revisit. And so I just want to ask you guys real quick, what do you do to take care of yourself or to prevent burnout? For me, my biggest thing is trying to assert work-life balance. So that means that this handy dandy work device goes on do not disturb. And I have it set up that way so that it's on do not disturb outside of my work hours. So that way, if I choose to not ignore it, my phone is already on silent. What do you guys do?
I do the same thing. At the end of the day, I just put my phone in
Yeah.
my work bag and it's out of sight, out of mind, day's over.
Yes, I love that.
I like to get involved in events that are in the local community because we do a lot of lived experience work. We have our lived experience at home, our lived experience in the
Jay, I see
professional
that you're
sphere.
off mute. Did you have something you wanted to share?
Oh, am I coming through okay? Okay. Can't hear me? Oh, you can hear me. Okay. I was just saying
Yes.
community events. So separate out, make friends outside of the workplace and things like that.
I love that. So socialization, sometimes just making sure that you're taking the time to get out of your work environment, get out of your head, and reconnect with others can really help be a grounding experience. I see that Bill said supervision, making sure that that's regular and consistent. Absolutely. Using your supervisor is definitely one of the best tips to prevent burnout. I feel like it's a good place to ask them questions, make sure that you're doing things correctly, but also if you're like overwhelmed, whether that's with your caseload or with the specific youth that you're having a hard time with engaging, it's really easy to bring those things up to your supervisor if you have a set time to speak to them. I see we have, I make it a priority to participate in my hobbies. I read or journal or draw or paint, play music, spend time outside, anything that brings me peace. And I see I like to make sure that I do things that I love to do, like get my nails done and be able to make sure that my own mental health is okay. Also, knowing what triggers me. Yes, I think that's a great way. Like knowing your triggers is very, very helpful to making sure that you can take the time when you are triggered, um, and just be able to take a deep breath, decompress, and then get back to what you need to do. But self-care, even in the form of getting your nails done, getting your hair done, taking a walk outside, journaling are absolutely great. It has been brought to my attention that I'm having a bit of a spotty connection, so just give me a second. I might drop out, but I'm gonna just try to reconnect with a different network. Please. Alrighty. I am back, and hopefully you guys can hear me a little bit clearer. I apologize. I am currently away from home, and so trying to use the public library Wi-Fi connection. Alrighty, so moving on to bias. So, one of the tools that we have for this is the implicit bias test. So, just so we know, bias is prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared to another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. So, it can be hard to ask ourselves about the bias that we hold. We might feel shame for having a bias, or that because we care for people or in a particular group, or race, that it's possible to have bias, that it isn't possible to have bias against it. But the truth is that everyone has biases. It's just a part of the human experience. So the implicit bias test, which you can scan the QR code if you'd like, this resource is from Harvard, and it's an easy interactive way to check our biases in multiple areas. We will not do this now, but I just wanted to provide you with the QR code so that you can get the link to complete it later in your own time. I just think it's a great way to just check in with yourself, know where you are currently, and what you might want to change in the future. It's also really important to notice that our biases are mostly unconscious. And so I'm not going to say that you are out here purposely trying to be biased against someone. And so it's just nice to know what your implicit bias might be. All right, so addressing biases. There are things that we can do on a regular basis to stay in tune with our biases and what might be affecting us. So, number one, check in with yourself. Notice if you have preferences and be curious about why these preferences exist. Reflect on generational and societal influences. Engage in opportunities to learn about other cultures. Engage in resources to check your unknown bias, as the implicit bias test referenced before, and just be open. Is anyone willing to share what they do to check in with themselves and their biases? It's okay if you're not. I just always like to open it up for questions. So I actually think that one of the things that Cassidy said, knowing what triggers you is also a good way to know like what's my preference and what are the things that might come up for me in terms of big emotions and when does that come up. And so I like to keep a tab on myself. Like if I'm working with the youth and I start to feel like they are pushing back or they are not agreeing with the plan and I'm taking that on a personal note, that's typically a key sign for myself that I have some bias in the situation that isn't going to be collaborative with the youth. And so I need to take a step back, need to figure out where that came from, and then refocus on it being youth driven. So that way I can make sure that the youth voice is coming out and not my own voice. All right. We will move on to personal experience. So, personal experience is the sum of all the events, emotions, and knowledge that an individual acquires throughout their life, which collectively shapes their beliefs, values, and perspectives. So, it's important to note that our experiences can affect how we view possibilities for success. For example, you might be all in the same situation, and one person might say, "This is impossible," while someone else says, "This is triggering me," or "That won't work," or "I've done this, so you should too." By being able to know that our personal experiences can affect our ability to be strength based, whether that's a positive or negative experience, it can affect how we view possibilities for success. Sometimes we might become judgmental when we see something that we've accomplished that someone else doesn't seem to be able to. But it's important to know that not one size fits all for any type of solution. And so we just need to figure out a way to use that youth's strengths to get them to their goal. So as we shift our focus from we're going to shift our focus to self-awareness. We can explore some crucial questions that can help us become more attuned to our own feelings and reactions. Checking in with ourselves can help to ensure that we're not allowing our personal experiences to cloud how we see the people that we work with and the experiences that we're having. So first, I always like to ask myself, how does my body feel? This simple check-in can reveal if you have stress, tension, or discomfort that you might be unconsciously holding on to. Next, consider whether or not you're allowing the family and youth to lead. Think, are you giving the youth the space to express their ideas and take initiative? Now, think about your listening habits. Are you listening to understand or are you listening to respond? It's also essential to ask yourself if you're considering the youth's perspective. This can help you build empathy and foster better communication. And finally, recognize when you need to take a break. Taking time to recharge is a key element of self-awareness and overall well-being. By checking in with these questions, we can cultivate a deeper sense of self-awareness and enhance our interactions with others. So, providers and systems. So, youth peer advocates work in many systems of care and collaborate with many other service providers. How other service providers show up in their work and how effective systems are can support or be a barrier to the strength based approach. Other people's burnouts can affect our ability to use a strength based approach. And when others want to be the hero or block the families, we serve with the ability to learn and grow their own hope. Others' biases, they can confirm our own, but they can also trigger us. And sometimes that can block success from our families. So when someone has cynicism or a deficit focused perspective, it can be exhausting to try to use a strength based approach in conversations. Sometimes productivity and program requirements can also be a barrier, as it can feed burnout and it can require us to work in a way that isn't strength focused. So, how do we take care of ourselves in the workplace? Taking care of yourself is essential for maintaining both your physical and mental health. So let's explore some key strategies to achieve this. Number one, remember to focus on what truly falls within your responsibilities. It's important to model positive skills and behaviors, but it's not your job to fix others. This mindset can help alleviate unnecessary stress. However, if you witness or hear something of concern, you should always document and report it to your supervisor. While it's not your job to fix it, it is your job to report it so that this doesn't happen again and that change can happen. Next, don't hesitate to lean on your supervisors and peers for support. Sharing challenges and seeking advice can provide new perspectives and solutions. Additionally, try to view challenges as learning opportunities. This approach can transform obstacles into valuable experiences that contribute to your growth. Finally, it's crucial to set boundaries, practice saying no, or provide realistic timelines when necessary. This helps in managing expectations and maintaining your workload. Always remember, your role as a YPA is not to save others. By taking care of yourself, you are better equipped to support those around you. Again, you're here to support others, not save them. Documentation. So simply put, documentation is the way of recording and proving the work that you're doing. It serves as an official record of your work and improves coordination of care, which helps everyone on the team stay more involved, work together effectively, and stay on track. Youth and families often deal with multiple providers and have a number of important details that are challenging to remember, so documentation helps. When information is accurate, documentation can be used to keep track of all of the progress that a youth is making towards a goal. This can help to reflect what the team's plan is, what progress is being made, as well as what changes might be necessary in the plan. Well-organized documentation can help supervisors and directors make informed decisions on how processes can be better supported and even expand programs. So documentation is necessary for your agency to be reimbursed for the services that you provide. As always, you should get specific training on writing progress notes and documentation at your agency, and your supervisor should be working with you to support you. If you don't know something and you have questions, please be sure to ask. Also, CTAC, where you access the online training for your YPA, offers training periodically through the regional trainings and webinars that they record and provide online. So documentation is definitely one of the topics that is covered if you would like to know more about that. So one of the ways to remove documentation as a barrier is to make documentation collaborative. So sometimes it can feel as though you need to find and highlight deficits to make your work show a need for the service or progress made. Your statements and documentation should always be written with the assumption that the families and youth will read them and that your documentation can influence other providers' perspectives. So first, work with the youth during sessions to complete documentation. This approach not only involves them, but empowers them to take ownership of their own story and journey. I like to encourage my youth. I've had certain youth that will sit down at the computer and just type their own progress notes at the end of the session. And I just make sure that it includes everything that our agency needs. And I really enjoy that because it allows them to just know what is being written. Another way is to just make sure that after you've written documentation, if your youth does not want to collaborate with you on that, that you let them read it so that they can offer any changes that they want before that's being submitted. So encourage the youth to take the initiative. When they feel like they're in control, they're more likely to be honest and open, which enriches the documentation. Use the youth's own words. Literally, I include quotes sometimes. This ensures that their voice is authentically represented, and it's important to confirm what's written, allowing them to verify or clarify any details. This helps to build trust and accuracy. If a youth is hesitant or declines to participate in the documentation process, don't worry. You can still involve them by asking questions that reflect their perspectives and experiences. This keeps the focus on the youth and respects their autonomy. So I might ask questions like, okay, we worked on skill building today, and we worked on taking deep breaths in moments of high stress. How did that make you feel? And so I might ask that youth that question so that I can document how that process went for them and how they felt about it. By making documentation a collaborative effort, we foster a sense of empowerment and respect for the youth narrative. All right, so reframing. So reframing is a good way to just change up our language. So number one, in order to reframe, we have to recognize the initial thought or opinion. Number two, we have to gather evidence. Number three, consider alternatives. And number four, develop a new frame. And so we're going to talk about this a little bit more in practice on the next slide. So when we're talking about reframing, we're really talking about reframing challenges and deficits as strengths. So here's some examples. So we should always use person first and strength-based language to prevent stigmatization. For example, instead of writing that a youth is non-compliant, we can describe the situation factually. The youth expressed difficulty following the plan due to feeling overwhelmed. So, in practice, we have some sentences here. So, the youth refused to participate in group. Instead of writing that in a deficit language base, we could write that in strength base. So, the youth expressed a preference for one-on-one support today. Or instead of saying that the youth struggles with anger management, we can reframe this by saying that our youth is working on developing coping strategies for their strong emotions. This allows us to avoid judgmental or diagnostic terms unless they are part of an official assessment by a qualified professional. We should also be mindful of cultural and identity considerations. Language should always affirm the youth's voice and experience. All right, so let's practice. How could you reframe the following statements that it's written in strength-based language? Our example is, the youth isn't motivated and doesn't seem to care about treatment. Give you guys a couple more seconds. I know that most of you are unable to come off of mute, so you may be typing in the chat. But I would love for you guys to reframe the following statement so it's written in strength-based language. Perhaps this example is a little difficult. I can give you an example, and maybe someone else can go from there. But one of the ways I might reframe this is that the youth may not see the current approach as meaningful or helpful.
Or the youth may still be trying to understand why he needs treatment.
Yes, absolutely. So we might say something along the lines of like, the youth may not, has not yet identified goals within treatment that feels relevant or aligned to their needs. Maybe they just need some time. Absolutely. Anyone else want to chime in? The youth may benefit from additional support or a different approach to build motivation and connection to the process. Absolutely. So it's not really that we are saying the youth just isn't motivated and doesn't care about their treatment. We really are trying to point out the fact that the youth is communicating with us. While it's through limited engagement, they are communicating that the current approach may need adjustment to better fit their strengths or their priorities. Great job. All right. So strength-based peer support. So the strength-based practice isn't about getting it right all the time. It's about making intentional choices in how we talk, listen, and make decisions. So these are my 5 steps for strength-based peer support. Number 1, lead with curiosity, not assumptions. Always ask open-ended questions that invite reflection. For example, you can ask a youth, what's been going on lately? What do you already know about handling this? What feels most important to you? Number two, name strengths in real time. Don't wait for outcomes. Recognize effort and insight. I love letting my youth know it took a lot of honesty to say that, and I appreciate you sharing. You can always tell youth, I like to tell them like what they've done positive during the session that I'm working with them. So maybe you're going to say, you showed persistence by coming back today, or you clearly care about and insert whatever decision or choice that they helped you with today in their process. Sometimes it's really important for our youth to name that strength as we're working on tasks and right up front rather than waiting for them to have the outcome. Offer choice and control. Even small choices can increase empowerment. For example, do you want to talk about school or family first? It's very clear we need to talk about both of them in our session, but just giving the youth a choice as to which one we talk about first can really help them open up. Or asking, would you rather brainstorm or just vent right now? Knowing what they need in the moment, whether that's support or just a listening ear, allows you to not overstep your boundaries when you're supporting them. We're asking straight up, what support feels most useful today? And then you can follow suit from there. Number four, use their strengths to address challenges. So connect what youth already do well to current barriers. For example, you've shown that you're good at advocating for yourself. How might that help here? I really enjoy using a strength that a youth has showed me in a previous circumstance to help them with another challenge. So maybe my youth has a great strength in communicating with others and effectively communicating. I might tell them, like, you're really good at communicating. How can I help you communicate what your needs are right now? And that allows them to just know, like, okay, I've got this and I can rely on myself a little bit more, gives them back their agency, and also just allows it to be strength-based. And number five, reflect hope and possibility, especially when youth feel stuck. For example, things are hard right now, but I still see strengths that we can build on. The key mindset shift is from fixing problems to partnering around goals, strengths, and choices. So, empowering youth with dignity. As always, youth are the experts in their own life, and our role as YPAs is to uplift, not override. Rather than just focusing only on challenges, we can help youth to identify their strengths, their skills, personal achievements, their natural supports, their past successes, their interests, and passions. These all are strengths, just so you know. So I know there's strengths just in the top line, but all of these things that are listed that says under focus on what's working are strengths. And these strengths can help youth to see themselves as capable, resilient, and resourceful, especially when navigating difficult systems. Youth-led navigation. So we always want to center youth voice and choice with youth-led navigation. The youth voice guides every step that we support by asking what they want, offering them options instead of directions, co-creating next steps, respecting their decisions, and checking in about their comfort level. Empowerment happens when youth feel in control of their journey. This also includes honoring identity, culture, and lived experience by practicing cultural humility. So culturally responsive practices include using inclusive and affirming language, avoiding assumptions, valuing practices and traditions, understanding how identity impacts access, and seeking culturally matched or affirming resources. By practicing cultural humility, we can show curiosity instead of assumptions. So cultural humility means that we are going to ask instead of assume, but we're also going to be open to learning, which helps us to build trust over time and to reflect on our own biases. Cultural humility is not just a skill, it is a mindset. So be sure to know that that's just a place that we can always grow. All right, so now that we've kind of talked about what you can do, let's talk about how we build that strength-based approach when working with treatment teams. So number one, start with strengths, even in your team meetings. Begin updates by naming a recent success or effort that's been shown by the youth or family. Even if we can start with progress, even if it's small. So one example of this might be a strength I've noticed since our last meeting is, and you can just open up with what a family has been doing well, starting right at the beginning. Number two, reframe deficit-based language. So encourage team members to pause and reframe. Instead of non-compliant, or unmotivated, try experiencing barriers to engagement or not finding current strategies helpful. This models a strength-based thinking without calling anyone out. And I do think that it's okay as a YPA to sometimes ask the team to pause and reframe and ask them, is there a different way that we can name this that focuses on these strengths instead of their deficits? Centering the youth and family voice is also important. So ask youth and families what they want to be included before meetings when possible. Share quotes or perspectives directly, not just interpretations. So you can, if you need to, as in a team meeting, you can always be that person that says what the family shared that has been most helpful for them lately is, and name it because you've asked them. So you can actually center their voice and make sure that even when you step in as a youth peer advocate, that you're reaffirming the youth and family voice. You can also advocate gently but consistently. You don't need to challenge the entire system at once. Strength-based advocacy sounds like, I just want to name a strength here before we move on. Or another way to look at this might be, and you can insert the reframe thought there. And lastly, use your documentation to reinforce strengths. Include at least one strength in every note or update, and tie strengths to your treatment goals and progress. And as we always say, if it's not written, it often doesn't count. And that includes our strengths. So we want to make sure that we're shifting our mindset from what's going wrong to what's working. And how do we keep building on this? All right. So what is the YPA role on treatment teams? So strength-based practice isn't about having authority, it's really about how we show up. So the roles that we can take on as a YPA are being a strength amplifier, making sure that strengths don't get lost in the conversation, which means intentionally naming strengths so that we don't always focus on problems. We can also be the language shifter. Reframe your deficit-based narratives in real time, labeling language into curiosity-based and respectful language. As a youth and family peer advocate, you can always keep the youth and family voice at the forefront of our plans. That should be in our goals, our objectives, and even preferences centered in team decisions. We can also be the bridge builder, help to connect systems, perspectives, and roles while maintaining a collaborative tone. We can be the hope holder, name progress and possibility, especially when the team or the family feels stuck. And lastly, be a peer. Show up as an equal. Walk alongside the youth, not directing the path. It's important to note you don't have to play all of these roles at once, but sometimes just stepping into one can shift the whole meeting. So I like to just think of these as little tools that I have in my pocket, and I can put on these hats when I need to. So if I'm in a meeting and I really notice that the language is just very negatively based, I want to be that language shifter and I want to step into that role and say, how can we reframe this? And if my youth is feeling like they don't have anyone on their side, I want to show up as their peer so that they know that I'm walking with them. All right, so what are some strength-based questions to ask your team? These questions can help promote strength-based thinking. So, what has worked even briefly before? What strengths is the youth using to cope with this right now? How can we build on what the family's already doing? What does the youth want us to know and focus on? Or how do we align this plan with their cultural values and identity? These questions allow us to stay in our peer role while still meaningfully contributing to team decision making. All right, so key takeaways. So using strength-based language is crucial when speaking with and documenting youth interactions. It not only influences the youth themselves, but also others that read that note. So like we said, language shapes perception, both for the youth and others reading it. Highlighting their past successes, abilities, efforts, and progress can promote hope, resilience, and empowerment. This approach encourages a mindset of growth. If you're unsure of a youth's strengths, please use open-ended and curious questions to explore their interests, their passions, and their natural supports. Focus on abilities, efforts, and progress, not just deficits. So instead of framing challenges as failures, consider them as areas for growth. This shift can make a significant difference in how youth perceive their journey. And remember, adopting neutral or positive phrasing instead of judgmental terms is key. This fosters an inclusive and supportive environment. And when helping youth navigate systems, we should use approaches that center strengths, honor their identity, validate their lived experience, build self-efficacy, support youth voice and choice, and reduce stigma and power dynamics. So we'll end here with one last closing reflection. What's one small shift that you can make to be more strength-based in your work, starting this week? And I'll give everyone a chance to, you can either come off of mute or pop it in the chat. Just what's your one small shift that you're going to make this week? I think for myself, walking into conversations, just as you guys all listed, like what's a positive attribute for yourself, by you just naming that, I was able to just see a little bit more of you and how you want to be perceived. And so I will definitely be asking that question of youth that I'm working with in the future, just so that I can already name one strength as soon as I meet them. I see in the chat, Emma said, I'm going to work on speaking up more in team and community meetings when strength-based language is not being used. Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else?
I
Alex?
definitely always ask, like, right at the beginning of my intakes, like, what their strengths are in their words. And I think I'm going to build on that during my intake
I like that.
and build a conversation with them about their strengths instead of them just listing them for me.
I like that. So taking it a step further. So Alex already asks her youth what their strengths are, but now wants to focus on building a more dynamic conversation around that. And I think that'll really help you allow the youth to kind of set in like in stone, like these are what my strengths are, but this might be how I want to use them to meet my goals and my objectives. Awesome. All right. If anyone else wants to name what their small shift is, I love it. You can put it in the chat or feel free to come off of mute. And while you're doing that, I will also open up the floor for questions. So does anyone have any questions about a strength-based approach or what we went over today? I will take the silence as a no. As always, there will be a copy of these slides available online. So you guys will definitely have access to that. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.